Are you going to talk to Mueller?
I'm looking forward to it, actually.
Do you have a date set?
I don't know. No, I guess they're talking about 2 or 3 weeks, but I would love to do it.
Would you do it under oath?
You know, again, I have to say, subject to my lawyers and all of that, but I would love to do it.
Would you do it under oath, Mr. President?
You mean like Hillary did it under? Who said that? But I would do it, and you know she didn't do it under oath.
But to reach a higher standard, you would do it under oath, correct?
Oh, I would do it under oath.
You would? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
No, I would do it.
Now, that was before President Trump spoke with his attorneys, whose heads must have been exploding when they heard that interview. Now his legal team is saying Mueller has not met the threshold needed to interview a president. They say the president shouldn't be treated like basically anyone else. The attorney also said president should only speak to them if he is the only person who can provide whatever they need. Obviously, that's a high bar. There are also questions about what form an interview would take. Was it in person? Does he get basically do the written questions here? Will there be a proctor? No. Could it be a combination of the two? Don't even joke with the Twitter. That might be an idea. Now, for whatever it's worth, Chris Christie, obviously you know him as New Jersey governor, but he was a prominent federal prosecutor, and now he's got a new gig at ABC News. Yes, he got a job. And in there as a legal advisor, consultant, whatever the gig is, he takes the position that the Donald's right.
Should the president sit down with him face to face?
No.
Why not?
I don't believe so. Listen, I don't think there's been any allegations, credible allegations against the President of the United States. And I don't think the President of the United States, unless there are credible allegations, which I don't believe there are, should be sitting across from a special counsel.
Okay, I want to get into some of the metrics of it, but people should know, and I don't have enough time. In that same interview, Christie, again, recalling the thing that he loved the most as a prosecutor was, hey, they never know what you have. So we don't know what Mueller has. So if I follow his own logic, if he doesn't know what Mueller has, then how does he know that he doesn't have enough evidence that should compel?
We all know what's going to happen.
So what's the rule in terms of, first of all, a president compared to you and I, what is the threshold for him versus us, and can he get a subpoena, or is he a different level of human being?
He's not a different level of human being. He can refuse to be interviewed. He can refuse to answer questions, and then he can be subpoenaed, and then he can move to quash the subpoena, and there'll be all of this, well, what do you want to ask me? I may invoke executive privilege. But we all know, we're 4 lawyers here, we know what's going to happen. What's going to happen is he's going to refuse, blame his lawyers, because that's what happens, and then be tweeting in the morning saying, I really wanted to do this. I was ready to go. I had my suit on. I was at my lawyer's
let's play
That's
this
what's
out.
Gonna happen.
Let's play this out, Dan. And let's go with Jimmy's thing, where they say, Mueller says, no, I'm not going to send you the questions in advance here. Your attorney can't come in here and answer the questions for you. I want you to come. No. Here's a subpoena. Not coming, all right? Because I don't think you have the authority to do it. First, which is the court that decides whether or not he has to appear? And then if he is compelled and he refuses, then what?
Well, let's break it down, first of all. They are right. The president is right that there has to be a showing that the information requested from the president cannot be obtained anywhere else. That's from a D.C. Circuit case in the 90s. But when you really break that down, that really only pertains to documents because, of course, who else can substitute for a witness's statements or testimony? You're going to ask, or the state of mind, exactly. You're going to ask the witness questions, and nothing can substitute for that. So it's a little bit of a ruse to say, oh, there's this higher standard, it's such a high bar. It's not when you're talking about an interview. It is maybe if you're talking about documents. But let's play this out a little bit. So they say, no, we're not going to come in voluntarily. I don't think Bob Mueller wants that, because what will end up happening is he'll send a subpoena, then it will start a long-running and difficult and extensive legal battle that will go to the courts. It will go to the district where the special counsel is in the federal court in Washington, D.C. There will be a judge assigned who will have to decide on whether or not they've met this threshold, whether or not, and then they'll get into the details of the questions that they want to ask, just like Jimmy said. And I think the reason why Mueller is reluctant to do that is because he'd rather hash it out with his lawyers, even if that means there's some negotiation about what the parameters of the interview are. They're not going to give him the questions to answer, but they will probably narrow it to topics that Trump can swallow, so to speak, that are directly pertaining to his investigation. That would be the way that Mueller wants.
But if he's trying to basically go on two fronts, obstruction, but then also collusion,
right.
If you're limiting the track where you can go for the questions, aren't you also limiting that basically almost one or the other? I mean, what if there's some of the information in the financials? Let's say he's gone through the tax records, and now all of a sudden he's got questions about dealings with Russia going back 10 years. You put that on the table, the Trump team would never agree to that. So is that kind of off the table if, to your point, they want to avoid a subpoena?
Look, it's going to be fact specific. I do not think that Bob Mueller can agree not to ask Trump about collusion when that is the mandate of the special counsel. He will not agree to that. And it may end up going to the court. And ultimately, the fact of the matter is, even though Bill Clinton sat for a deposition, was forced to sit for a deposition, that the president is not above the law, Donald Trump has shown that he will do things that no one else has done before.
Okay, so step it out one more. Let's say finally Mueller has no choice. He goes the subpoena route. And finally, through district court, they say, yes, he's met his threshold. You got to show up. First of all, is that appealable? Can Trump push this all the way to the Supreme Court?
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's say he exhausts all his legal options. And at the end of the day, whatever court it is says, yes, you got to show up. You got to show up. What if he says no?
Well, then you go, normally you go into contempt proceedings, and if someone refuses to testify pursuant to a lawful subpoena in a grand jury, they go to jail during the pendency of that grand jury. Now, of course, that will never happen, but that is how this would ultimately play out. But Trump will argue that he's above the subpoena, and he will have some arguments.
And will impair his ability to do his job, and other arguments I've heard. All right, Mayo, let's say Mueller does get him in front, and let's say the parameters are broad enough that I don't limit your answers to this, and I'm going to ask Doug the same thing. Give me some of the questions fitting, again, the tracks of both obstruction and collusion that you think, without knowing obviously the information that Mueller already has at his disposal, what are some of the answers you want to get from Trump, knowing that he's a chatty witness?
Well, I think I go back to all of his Twitter feeds. I go back to everything that he said on television that contradicts what his counsel has said over the year. And I'll go to what his spokespeople have said when they went on to television. So, and at the end of the day, I'm going to ask, when did you have your first conversation about Mr. Flynn? With whom? Who was present? Where did that occur? Did you play any role whatsoever in the drafting of the memo on the plane? And each time he answers a question, chances are he's going to be leading to new avenues of obstruction. I'm going to ask him about whether he had the conversation concerning loyalty.
And most of these questions, you already know the answer?
I know the answer to the vast majority, but with Donald Trump, first of all, I won't have to know the answer because I'm not in front of a jury. So really, I have a lot of leeway that I wouldn't have if I were in a court of law getting ready to try the case and I ask a question I don't know the answer to. And Donald Trump will provide me, chances are, with entire new avenues of investigation. My other thought is that my understanding was that there was also a grand jury impaneled in New York, if I'm not mistaken. Now, maybe I am. I know they were talking about doing that, but I don't believe that they're limited just to the district court in Washington. So there's a possibility also that you convene another grand jury outside of Washington, and that district court opinion does not control what happens in the other districts.
Doug, I would imagine that why people were fired, what led to the dismissals of Comey and others, I would imagine would also be of interest to Mueller.
Sure. Dan mentioned something a while back that was very interesting, where this may be an opportunity also to say to Donald Trump, listen, we've done our work. We want you to come and explain yourself. There are going to be, I'm sure there are people who have testified to the events, and they don't need Donald Trump to say that they happened. But if he says, I was at that meeting, I may have said that, but I meant this, he's given an opportunity to explain himself. The bigger problem we'll have is if that meeting never took place and they spoke to 3 people that all say that meeting took place and this is the way it happened. So really, it's an opportunity for him to explain himself. I don't think the special counsel needs him to help them with the case. They just need to give him an opportunity to either explain it or hang himself.
I'm already over it, but it seems to me they have more than proven, or there's so much for the obstruction. It's what we don't know is what's on the collusion side. And I would imagine that would be the lion's share of the conversation, that if he does ever get in front of him, we'd love to know.
It would, but
what did this check? What was that for? What was the file?
a skilled prosecutor, though, it's not the questions he's going to ask. Be careful and make sure you don't ask certain questions, because I'm not so sure that they're going to want to throw him a ground ball and ask him, well, what were you thinking when you said this? Because he is going to be so well prepped on the answer that eliminates
Come on,
obstruction.
he's a nightmare client, and you
It is
know it.
impossible
I
to
understand
You
that,
can't
but
coach him. You can
he's
only
going
hope
to
to
know.
contain
He's
him.
going to know the magic answer to those questions.
All right,
I'm
coming
sure.
back here, we're going to leave Donald Trump here. You can thank me later here for a minute. When we come back, we're going to talk about some cases closer to home. More key witnesses taking the stand in the Prococo corruption trial. Dominic Carter, he's been at the courthouse all day. He's next with the latest.